Hello everyone and welcome to another one of our videos. Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace the rear shock absorbers on a W140 Mercedes S-Class. This is going to be on my 1995 S320 and this is for models without rear auto leveling or adjustable suspension. The mechanical process is going to be relatively the same for those models, but this is going to cover the basic stripped down version with just normal shock absorbers. So what I'm going to do is walk you over to the trunk. We're going to show you how to remove some of the trunk liners and peel them back to reveal the upper shock mount nut. And then I'm going to take that nut off and we're going to show you how to remove the shock absorbers from the vehicle and replace them. Okay, so we're here in the trunk now and the vehicle is still on the ground. The reason for that is that we're going to take the top nuts off of the shock absorbers and raise the vehicle up after doing that, because these shock absorbers in this particular vehicle suspension system act as the limit straps. So when the suspension is fully drooped out, the shock absorbers are the limiting factor. So if you were to take them loose with the vehicle up in the air and the suspension drooped, they would pop loose, potentially injuring you. There are a couple ways around that. You can support the wheel with a jack or do something like that, but this is the way that we prefer to do it on this particular chassis. So in order to access the tops of the rear shock absorbers, all you need to do is remove these 4 fasteners, and from then, at that point, you'll be able to peel back the trunk liner. So there's this rear liner, which will kind of flip upwards, and each side liner will kind of fold inwards, and you should be able to access the top nut of the rear shock. So I do want to mention that whenever you have the carpet pulled out, it's a good time to check your spare tire pressure, clean everything up a little bit, because generally speaking, your spare tire is going to be out of air or close to it if you don't keep up with that. So I'm going to go ahead and pop those fasteners out using a plastic pry tool to remove them so I don't damage the fasteners themselves, and I'll come back and show you what we're going to do next. Alrighty, in the previous segment I said that there were 4 clips. I lied, there were actually 5. There is one that's hidden underneath the spare tire well panel, which is this guy right back here. So once you've gotten those 5 out, at that point what you can do is drop your spare tire panel down, and you're going to be able to maneuver these panels back, reach inside, somewhat like so, and be able to get the nuts off using a 17mm wrench. Now, I did not flip back this rear panel back here. I only moved back these panels on the sides, and I was able to do it blindly just by feeling around for the nut, getting the wrench on there, and then taking it off. It's not on there super tight, so you should be able to get it off with a normal 17mm wrench or a ratcheting wrench, anything like that. So once I get the nut off on this side, I'm going to show you what we're going to do as far as jacking up the car and removing the shocks goes. Alright, so we have the vehicle up in the air now. The shock is loose at the top, as you can see and kind of hear. And at the bottom, what we need to do to get it loose is remove the plastic cover underneath the lower control arm. To do that, there's going to be 4 10mm bolts, one right here, one in the back here, and then 2 on the opposite side, mirroring their positions. And then we're going to have a large bolt going through here. Now, chances are it's going to be an 18 and a 19mm, 19mm being on the bolt head side and the 18mm being on the nut side, just like the front, but I will confirm that once I take it off for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this plastic cover off, clean it up while I'm at it, and then I'm going to pull the shock out and show you it next to the new one so we can proceed from there. Okay, as you can see, we have both of these shock absorbers out. It turned out I needed to use a 19mm socket on the nut along with a 19mm backing wrench, so not 18 like the front. You can see the new shock next to the old one. New one's a lot cleaner. The old one's been leaking for a while, and it is most definitely not in the best of shape. So it was very easy to take out. Once I took the nut off, the bolt came right out. I took the shock, lifted it out of the lower control arm, out of its mounting position, and just slid it down and out from underneath the vehicle. So the old one, or the new one, is going in the reverse of the way that the old one came out, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that in and show you what it looks like installed. Okay, so we have the new shock in here. It is installed, but I want you to note that the nut down here is not tightened fully, because these shocks need to be tightened whenever the vehicle is in its resting position in order to set the bushings correctly. If you tighten them whenever you have the vehicle up in the air with the suspension drooped out, whenever you have the vehicle set on the ground and whenever you're driving, those bushings are going to be in a state of torsional stress at their resting position, which is not good and will wear them out prematurely. So what I'm going to do now is go over to the other side of the car and swap out the other shock, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to get the top portion of the shock absorber, the shock rod, into the mounting position inside the trunk. We are now finished with the shock replacement on both sides. We have the vehicle back on the ground. We torqued the lower bolts to spec. The upper bolts we guided in not using an Allen key like we did for the front shock absorbers, but instead just by lowering the car very, very gradually, going back and forth between the two sides and making sure that everything was falling into place correctly. Wasn't too bad of a process doing that. It was pretty easy. Otherwise, once the car was back on the ground, we tightened up the bolts, the lower bolts on both sides. Those are now tightened, and we're ready to put back on the lower control arm covers. Those we still have to clean before putting them back on, but all you need to do to reinstall those is simply snap them back into place and reinstall the 4 10mm bolts that hold them into place. So, this was a really, really easy installation. It was a little bit more difficult than the front shock absorbers just from the standpoint of having to tear apart a little bit of the interior, but overall, maybe an hour-and-a-half long job if you're a fairly experienced DIYer. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.